Wonderhussy here in one of my all-time favorite places in Nevada, Valley of Fire State Park. Believe it or not, this is just an hour outside Vegas, but I bet the majority of people who visit Las Vegas never bother to come out here. It's basically a giant sea of orange sandstone rock formations that formed from sand dunes 150 million years ago. And it's really rough and grippy and great for climbing on. Like a giant playground. I guess the Anasazi, or the ancestral Puebloans, as they now call them, lived in a nearby fertile river valley. The land out here is not really fertile enough to grow crops, so they couldn't live here. But they would come here, I guess for like religious and ceremonial purposes, for thousands of years. And to this day, you can still see tons of petroglyphs that they carved. Unfortunately, the natives didn't have this place to themselves for very long. Before you know it, the white man had discovered it, and things were about to change for the Indians. In fact, there's a really kind of haunting monument out here to one of the white settlers. As you're driving out the back of the park towards Lake Mead, you come across this lonely white cross way out in the middle of a wash. And if you hike out to it, you can see there's a name on it. John G Clarke, Sergeant Company B-13, New York Cavalry, Civil War. Born July 6, 1843, died June 26, 1915. There's a little sign by the side of the road that tells you about this guy. Well, apparently he was a Civil War veteran who resettled in Bakersfield, California after the war. And in 1915, he was on his way from Bakersfield to Salt Lake City for whatever reason, in a buckboard wagon crossing this desert. Well, he came to this spot here, and for whatever reason, he unhitched his horse and tied it to the back of his wagon, and then crawled underneath his buckboard and died. Probably of thirst, but no one really knows for sure. I guess somebody eventually found his bones or his body and erected this monument to him. Now, some of the Native Americans weren't too happy about all these white settlers stomping through their, well, sacred or ceremonial grounds, and some of them actually fought back. One of the most popular hiking trails in the park is called Mouse's Tank, and it's named after this southern Paiute outlaw or renegade named Little Mouse, who, well, I guess he generally just sort of caused trouble for the settlers in the area. Petty thefts, messing with their horses, stuff like that. Well, in the 1890s, he was accused of killing 2 prospectors, and whether or not he actually committed the murders or was just being railroaded so they could get rid of him is up for debate. But he was able to escape and evade capture for months by hiking way down this canyon that the trail's named after. And I guess there's a tank somewhere out here, like a natural bowl in the sandstone that collects rainwater, life-sustaining rainwater. So he was able to survive out here for months without being captured. Then, after Valley of Fire became a state park in 1936, the Civilian Conservation Corps built these stone cabins here. These cabins are so friggin' cool. They're built out of local sandstone that they just quarried here in the area, but they built them up into shelters for passing travelers, believe it or not. I mean, they even have like windows and timbered ceilings and even fireplaces. Man, how cool would it be to spend the night in one of these stone cabins? There's 3 of them. The one we just went in, and there's this one in the middle, and then one on the end. And they're all 3 pretty much the same. It's almost like a motel. It's a fireplace, timbered ceiling, and a window. And then down here on the end, one more. Oh, look at the fireplace in this one. Oh my gosh, that looks so cozy. Wow, they did a solid job building these. And then look at the view out the window. Oh, wow. My, how things have changed. Somehow I don't think they would let you spend the night in one of these cabins anymore. In fact, that's the only downside to Valley of Fire, is the only place you're allowed to camp overnight is in one of 2 developed campgrounds. These campsites actually aren't bad though. They kind of designed each one to be sort of tucked into its own little private sandstone nook. I stayed here with my sister once and it was actually pretty cool, although not as cool as being able to boondock wherever you want in the desert. You know what I mean? Like, how awesome would it be to camp out here? This is called the Fire Rave. And to me, it looks like a slab of bacon, but it also kind of looks like the famous rock formation called the Wave in Antelope Canyon that you've probably seen pictures of. The main difference being, to hike into the Wave in Antelope Canyon, you got to get a permit, something like a year in advance. But you can hike to the Fire Rave here in Valley of Fire anytime you want. Because of the amazing otherworldly landscape, there's been a ton of movies filmed out here, including Star Trek Generations, Austin Powers, Transformers, Casino, and most notably a Western called The Professionals, starring Burt Lancaster, Lee Marvin, Jack Palance, and Claudia Cardinale. That's when men were men and movies were movies. You can still see the stone ruins of one of their old movie sets on the White Domes Trail. I think this was supposed to be some kind of Spanish hacienda. By the way, you guys, remember, this is only an hour outside Vegas. Now, with all this awesome natural beauty, you'd think Valley of Fire would be an awesome place to do a photo shoot. But you'd be wrong. I actually used to work full-time as a freelance artistic nude model, and amateur photographers would hire me to do these, artsy pictures laying on rocks and stuff in the desert. Well, a lot of them seemed to think Valley of Fire would be the perfect place to do a shoot. Now, early on in my career as a model, I was warned by another local Vegas photographer not to shoot out in Valley of Fire because the ranger out there is a real hard ass and he'll bust you in a hot minute. Word on the street was that the lead ranger out here was also a hobbyist photographer, and so he wanted to save this as like his private location. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but I did several photo shoots out here without incident. I just kind of snuck and kept a low profile. But then one day, things went horribly wrong. I was doing a shoot out here once with this Spanish photographer from Spain and another model, and we hiked down this little slot canyon. It's not one of the major hiking trails, it's just some random slot canyon in a wash, and it's well out of sight from the road, and he was shooting pictures of us one at a time, climbing up this formation, and apologies, the sun's right behind it, but he was getting pictures of us as we jumped off the top so that it looked like we were flying naked. So as he was photographing the other girl jumping off of the top, I'd be climbing around to get in position for my turn. We took turns like that. Well, as I was climbing up that little notch there, kind of around the corner out of sight, I heard a voice. "Young lady, put your clothes on. Sir, you come with me." Oh my God, busted by the cops. I didn't know what to do. I figured, well, he doesn't know I'm here, so maybe the photographer will get less of a fine if he only has one naked woman with him rather than two. So I kind of just stayed hidden back there, naked as a jaybird, because I had left all my clothes in a pile at the mouth of the canyon, thinking that, I don't know, the photographer might want to take some nudies as I was walking down the canyon. So I kind of just left them in a pile back there by the car. Well, I didn't have anything with me, so I just stayed crouched out of sight, but I could hear the ranger reading them the riot act. What do you guys think would have happened if a couple of cowboys came along and found you like this? They could have had their way with her and put a bullet in your head. Well, none of that made any sense because, first of all, they could have had their way with her whether she was wearing clothes or not. They're pretty easy to remove, newsflash, and they could have put a bullet in the guy's head as well, whether or not the girl had clothes on. And moreover, cowboys? What year is this, dude? This was like a while back, maybe 10 years ago, but it was still like 2009. There haven't been renegade cowboys out here in quite a while, as far as I know. Anyway, once she got her clothes on, he started marching them down the canyon back to the car up here. We had taken, well, at that time I had a white pickup truck, a Ford Ranger, really small mini pickup that all three of us had squeezed into to drive out here from Vegas. So he's marching her and him back to the car. And I'm back there still crouching behind the rock like, well, what do I do? What if he makes them leave the park and they abandon me here, naked and afraid? Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get back home? It's not like I can even go hitch a ride without any clothes. So I decided to just sort of scramble along naked like some Manson family girl in the brush here. Like I sort of crawled from bush to bush, which, as you can see, there really isn't much vegetation in this canyon. So I just tried to stay like a good distance behind them and keep some kind of cover between them and me and keep a low profile. Oh man, it was not my proudest moment, but I'm pretty sure, even though I'm sure like my adrenaline was going, surely I had to see the comedy in all of it. I'm pretty sure I did. The photographer was pretty smart. He thought fast on two fronts. One, he had one of those cameras that holds two different types of memory card. I guess one to shoot RAW files and one to shoot JPEGs. So as he was walking, I guess he very slyly slipped the card containing the RAW files out of his camera and like put it in another pocket. So that way, if the ranger made him delete all the pictures on the card, well, he would only lose the JPEGs. Darn it. So that was pretty smart. The other thing he thought that was smart was, well, as they were hiking along and they got to the mouth of the canyon here, there's my pile of clothes sitting there with my flip-flops. So if the ranger saw that, he'd probably wonder who that belonged to. But the photographer said to the other model, whose name was Caitlin, "Caitlin, get your other change of clothes." So that way he played it off like it was her clothes. Pretty smart. Okay, now meanwhile, they finally reached the road where the car was parked, just kind of pulled off the side of the road there. That's my new car, but imagine that being my old Ford Ranger. Well, there's this big bush here, and so that's where I hid. I kind of like crawled up in here so that I was hidden from them and they couldn't see me, but I could sort of see them and I could hear what they were saying. So imagine, if you will, you're crouching here naked in the shadow of this thorny bush, watching a park ranger read the riot act to your Spanish photographer friend and your fellow nude model. And the model wasn't saying anything, she was just being quiet. The photographer was just, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. Well, the ranger wanted to see his license and registration, which, remember, it was my truck. So now the guy goes, well, why is this truck registered in Nevada? And you're from California. He lived in California, even though he was from Spain. Well, it's a friend's truck. I borrowed it. Well, okay, he let that go. But then he basically told him, you're not welcome in this park anymore today. You need to get in the truck and leave now. Leave now? Holy cow! What about me? I'm crouching here naked behind this bush. Thankfully, the ranger gave the registration back to the photographer and then went and got in his truck and drove away. So we had at least a few minutes to get our stuff together. So as soon as that ranger drove away, the other model sprinted over with my pile of clothes, started sprinting down the canyon because she thought I was still back at the bottom of the canyon hiding. Well, then I waved to her from this bush. No, I'm right here. So she gave me my clothes, I put them on real quick, and we went and got in my pickup truck. But now we were facing a different quandary. I mean, the ranger had driven away in his truck, but the photographer had a hunch that he hadn't gone far, and he was probably just waiting right around the corner to make sure we actually left. So remember, I had a Ford Ranger pickup, and it was not an extra cab. It was a tight squeeze in there for all three of us. But because the Ranger didn't know there was a second model with us, and we really didn't want to get on his bad side anymore, I had to crouch down with my head bent over so that you couldn't see me through the car windows. And we had to drive the entire rest of the way out of the park like that because sure as sugar, that ranger had pulled his truck over just around the corner up there and was waiting to make sure we left. And we didn't want him to know that there was 3 people in the car, so I had to ride bent over the entire way out of the park, which is like another 10 miles. But all's well that ends well. None of us ended up getting a ticket or a fine or anything, which was nice. And I think the photographer actually did get some photos of us before that happened, so the whole day wasn't a bust. But whew, it was a close call. And now I understood why people said don't shoot photos in Valley of Fire. Wow, it's interesting. I haven't been back to this location since that happened, like 8 or 9 years ago, 7 years ago. I don't know. It was a while back. But it's good to see this little bush is still standing and still keeping its secrets. Anyway, even though I don't recommend doing any nude photo shoots at Valley of Fire, it's still an amazing place to come as a day trip from Las Vegas. Say what you will about Vegas, but the city is surrounded by spectacular natural scenery. I guess it's what keeps me living here, and it's just one more thing I love about the great state of Nevada.